It's time for a laugh and learn. The Goddess Hekate, the Goddess Hekate, with the amazing Kenn Payne, who is also the sanctuary of the Hekate Polymorphos, right?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. And Kenn, thanks for joining.
No, thanks for having me.
How are you?
I'm good. It's a mild, light evening here, so I'm just basking in it a bit.
I like that. And yeah, it's drizzling here, slightly overcast. So, but that's okay. I do want to remind everyone that this is for entertainment purposes only. Do not make decisions based upon what we say. Seek professional assistance, really. And please purchase responsibly, know your limits. And we are here to share, not to sell, because Kenn has been on my channel a couple of times before because he's got this new little, Oracle deck out. It's called the Oracle of the Hekatean Path, which he wrote all the details, and Chris Butler did the images. Links are below, so you can still see that. So today is a conversation about the goddess Hekate. So I appreciate everybody being here. Do the thumbs up thing. Links are below. And so there we go. Okay, I'm just going to get this out of the way because for those of you who don't remember this, here's this great little promo video that Chris created. So I'm going to put that up. And so how does it feel seeing that?
I mean, I always get quite happy to see it, but yeah. I still have this very weird sense of objectivity, whereas it's almost as though I'm watching it as someone else rather than as the person that's helped bring it about.
Right. I completely understand. And so all of the links are below if you would like to watch the deck casuals with Chris and Kenn. And if you would like to purchase responsibly this deck. And a lot of people are discovering the deck. And so this is wonderful because it tells me there is a need for understanding this particular goddess. So, and so let's say hi to some of the, here we have, okay. So let's say hi to the best chatters, the best lurkers, the work lurkers, and the future lurkers. And thank you for being here. If you were watching this on playback, leave a comment. Make sure that that you've appreciated it. And Beth Aspasia Rising is here. Hello, Beth.
Hello.
Kaylee Fogo Pogo is here. Good to see you. And Kaylee is cow lurking. Her job is to enter cows into a database.
Oh.
So there you go. So when she says it's genuinely she's cow lurking. So,
and I paid to have bull horns today as well. I think somebody mentioned that as well.
Yes. And Jonathan is here. Hello. Tracy is here. Thank you, Tracy. Hi, Carl. Good to see you. And Jonathan said, I love that this started when I was going through a crossroads. Yes. Yeah. And there's Carl saying, you look like you got horns.
Yeah. So. Well, it's actually crescent moons, with a Strophilos wheel, but with me sat in the middle, it does just look like horns.
Yes, and we will be talking about those symbols here shortly.
Mm.
The amazing Linda De Gonzalez is here, who is hosting me tomorrow to do Akashic record and tarot card readings. So, and I am, and Vanessa is here. I would say, Kenn, are you horny, or are those truly devil horns?
I think it's the inner Dionysian in me trying to get it, come out slightly less obviously.
So do you want to give people a little bit of background of who you are before I start with all of these?
We can try. I mean, whenever I'm asked these questions, I kind of always just like, yeah, I'm just me. I'm just a person. I'm nobody special. But obviously, when you start sort of chipping away at the details, and obviously, I realize I actually it does go back quite a way for me. But like my main relationship with Hekate has been about 15 years, that sort of maybe give or take. Obviously, in hindsight, you kind of look back on things before then and you realize, oh yeah, that was her as well. Oh, and that was her. Oh, look, and I do remember that. Then, so more, I tend to sort of think that she's probably always been there, but it's only in the last sort of 15 or so years that I've been more actively aware and more actively involved with her.
Yeah.
But I mean, for me, I've been a sort of solitary practitioner of some form of pagan witchcraft since I was 15. And then in later years, in the last sort of 10 years, through membership of the Covenant of Hekate, which is an international group that was brought together by Sarita Dieste and others to sort of celebrate the mysteries of Hekate across the world. And it's become, quite a global little community. And obviously within that, I've become a torchbearer and a key bearer of various things, along with other priestesses and devotees. And so this, for me, it's all it feels quite natural because it's just part of who I am. I don't kind of see it as anything different or extra. And I suppose that's possibly why I don't think about it in too much detail until people sort of tease it out of me.
Sure. Oh, of course. And Flower Beauty Peacock Rainbow is here. Rush is here. And Tracy Rivers, the links for Kenn are in the description. Please do follow him. And Calla Lizzie is here. And then Diana, or Wonder Woman, is here. And Break Time from Digging in the Dirt. So okay, so this is wonderful, because since we're talking about the goddess Hekate, Hekate, who is she? What are some of her origins?
So, I mean, obviously, everybody is usually aware of her being a goddess, and more often than not is kind of loosely termed a Greek goddess. But actually, the historical origins, kind of the sort of tendrils disappear off in different locations at different time periods. And so it becomes incredibly difficult to pinpoint the exact origin. Obviously, most of the details that we have about it do tend to stem from sort of ancient Greek, Hellenistic world, but the modern day Bulgaria, which was ancient Thrace, and Caria, which is now in Turkey, they were all potential sort of origin places for her before she became more notable by the Greeks. I mean, I think it's about, I think the first literary sources we have for her, it's kind of the sort of around the 9th to 8th centuries BCE, which you get like Homer's Odyssey and Hesiod's Theogony.
Mhm.
The worship of her within sort of Caria and stuff was sort of pre 1600 BCE, which is when she sort of came into ancient Greek sort of modern myth time. But it's really difficult to pin her down, and I think that kind of encapsulates the fact of, you know, how enduring she's been over the, you know, over the millennia. That I think she is unknowable. I think there is an unknowable, intangible aspect to all divine beings and spirits, I think, but particularly with Hekate, that she is, well, she is literally the embodiment of liminality. So she's, you know, she's neither one thing nor the other. She's not here, she's not there, but she's always present.
I really like that idea of looking at the liminality or the liminal space, because that is an area of which she navigates and she operates. So I think that's great. Book Bewitched is here. Medium Betsy Palmer is here. If one of the moderators could put Kenn's YouTube link in the description, I would appreciate it. So one of the things, and we talked a little bit about this. Oh, thank you, Carl. The spelling of her name. It's oftentimes Hekate, like I have it spelled here. It's also Hacate. Part of the spelling comes from which, is it Greek or is it Roman?
So the when it's spelled with a K, that is the Greek transliteration. Then obviously when it's spelled with a C, it's the later Roman transliteration.
Okay.
Whereas if you look, you know, if you take the name itself in ancient Greek, there is no H sound really. So it has sort of more of an E sound. So it's sort of Hekate. So, but I mean, you know, because we're not ancient Greeks, you know, we're you know, English, Canadian, American, German, whatever, right. You know, we say it in our tones or our accents, and so, you know, you will encounter lots of different people, all sort of saying it in slightly different ways. And I mean, I'm guilty of this myself. I've listened to people talk, and they've used different ways of saying it throughout a whole conversation.
Yes, and I will.
It's sometimes difficult to you know, you just go with what feels comfortable at that, you know, that given moment.
Yes.
But I think there is an important thing to note that obviously, you know, for all intents and purposes, this is her name. You know, speaking from experience, you know, my full name is Kenneth, but the amount of people that have found that difficult to either write down correctly or even say correctly over the years, you know, it gets a little bit sort of head scratchy. But, you know, if somebody's going to get your name wildly wrong, you know, eventually it's going to grate. And I think, you know, if you want a divine being's attention, you've kind of got to try and get the name right at least.
I would highly recommend that you get the name appropriate, because and thank you, Linda, for putting Kenn's link in there. And Kaylee said, I've heard it pronounced without the A at the end too. Hekate.
So Hekate tends to be more in reference to an Egyptian goddess of childbirth that was frog-headed. That tends to sometimes get conflated with Hekate. However, there's not been that much historical evidence to support that conflation. But, you know, that there are, because again, when you start looking at language and you start looking at you know, especially ancient languages, you know, if you've got ancient Greek that didn't have any H sounds, and for all intents and purposes, sort of Egyptian that didn't really have any sort of vowel sounds, you can't really get the same sounds from the same letters or what we think are the same letters, because they are technically two different cultural languages.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there's there are still some people that see a connection between the Egyptian Hekate and the Greek Hekate.
Yeah. Well, and part of what I was saying back to Kenn backstage before we started is she's a very ancient goddess of origins, and I'm asking you, what are her origins? Well, that's like asking which came first, the chicken or the egg, because I think there's a lot of references in different spiritual paths or different religions where the aspects of Hekate are present. They just are framed in a different way. So
Yeah,
they're given a different personality. So
yeah, and I mean, that will be reflective of whatever cultural, melting pot that they're formed in. But I think that the reason that such similar concepts or beings materialize across the world and throughout time is, as I've mentioned previously, that it's Hecate's proximity to the human condition and the fact that she is inextricably linked to everything we do, from the moment of birth to to various aspects of life, and then obviously to death and the underworld and that, in the afterlife. And obviously in later antiquity she was even seen as the source of the souls that would be later reincarnated. So she is everywhere and in everything. And again, her as the embodiment of this liminality kind of just explains why she is everywhere.
yeah, I love that description that she is her proximity to the human experience. That gave me full body chills. So I love that. I love that. Chris Elemental Cartomancy is here. Hello, Chris. Chris, this is the amazing Kenn. So he's the the creator of the Oracle of the Hekatean Path. Purchase responsibly, know your limits. Links are below. I'm always working it. And hi, Millie. Good to see you. Good to see you. So, so you referenced this a little bit. When did you become aware of Hekate?
So consciously was probably, I think, kind of sort of 2005, 2006, when I started to see the name cropping up mostly in sort of unreferenced tertiary sort of descriptions of the neo-pagan idea that, oh well, Hekate is the crone aspect of the triple goddess, and that was kind of about it. It didn't really ever go into much detail. There was no background on her history.
Yeah.
Obviously, you could Google and you'd get off references of, oh well, she's a Greek goddess of witchcraft or a Greek goddess of the Crossroads. Yeah. But again, the depth of information was a bit lacking initially, and it does take a bit of digging around to to start getting on the right track. And most of the original stuff that I started to come across was quite academic, because it was from a historical, archaeological,
yes,
anthropological sort of background, which for me is fine because I've just got one of those brains. But that's not everybody's cup of tea. It's not everybody's, not everybody can absorb information like that. And then obviously, in more recent decade or so, with the work of people like Sarita Dieste and Cindy Brannan and Jeff Cullen and Jack Grail and Jason Miller, all these different people that are exploring Hekate both in a historical sense but also in a devotional sense. It's really beefed the library out for good solid reference material for you to to get to grips with her. So for me, it was more just, I don't know, I kind of had this niggling thing that I needed to, at the time, I needed to have like a patron deity. It seemed to be the thing at the time in sort of the, in the 2000s into the mid 2000s. And I kind of did a guided meditation. And weirdly, it wasn't Hekate that I found in the guided meditation. It was Demeter. But it was Demeter in as much as she kind of just sort of led me on a bit further, and then kind of like pulled this curtain back and was like, there you go. And it was like all these other, mostly, Greek, Roman type deities. And it was through a sort of, again, as was mentioned by one of the commenters before about being at Crossroads. That's where I was. I was, at a crossroads, and I was being kind of, broken down and rendered and, stripped to the, to the bare nothings of everything that wasn't really serving me at the time. And it was Hekate that kind of came at the sort of end of that to say, right, okay, enough. We're gonna move away from this now. And there was it was always this sense of guidance and this sense of comfort and knowing, again, her her proximity, her always being there. And then obviously, as I sort of touched on before, the in hindsight, when I started to look back at things, going right back to when I was a small child, my mum had a original mythic tarot by I've forgotten the bloody name.
I can't remember. Chris would probably know it. Yeah.
But she had an original one, and I didn't know what tarot was. My mum's not particularly spiritual, or I think she was, like most bored housewives in the sort of mid to late 80s, early 90s. There's a bit of crystalline and tarot-in and things like that on the side. But I kind of just felt drawn to that particular item, and I kept taking it out, and I kept getting told off. I kept getting told, don't touch it, it's not for you. But there was particular cards in that, because it's all Greek sort of myth themes, and there were certain cards in that I was always drawn to, and one of them was the moon, which when my mum finally went in my late teens, when obviously I started my journey, she gave me the deck. That I started to look through it, and I was like, oh, hang on a minute, that's Hekate. That's Hekate there. So these weird sort of reflective hindsight synchronicities kind of have been like, okay, yeah, she's always been there. So this is all part of,
I love that.
I don't really want to say sort of, the grand design, but, I feel as though it's all kind of been part of my particular path to walk.
Of course. I love that. Okay, so Millie said, love Hekate. She's always protecting me. Yes. And Chris did say he saw you when you were on with, when we were with Chris and talking about the deck. So, and Mark is here from your channel. Hello, Mark. Good to see you. And Beth said, Hekate seems far less straightforward than many other deities. It's difficult for me to know how to approach her, not from fear, but sort of mystery, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think you're not alone in feeling that. Nope. I think that because obviously that now there is so much more being sort of revealed about her and explored about her, that it can seem kind of almost like a very impenetrable subject of like, where do I start? Well, what do we do?
Yes.
And again, I think this is a human thing. We can get kind of caught up, and we like Aspasia says, not out of fear, but from this sense of mystery, which then becomes this sense of the unknown, which then is like, well, what do I do? Because I don't really know what to do.
Yes.
And obviously, I always just say, start small. You don't need to know, all the symbols or all of the, historical facts and stuff. If there's a specific aspect of Hekate that you've already become aware of, whether it's as a protector or a guide or, a goddess of witchcraft or whatever it is, then use that as your focus. And like I say, start small, light a candle, light some incense. It doesn't have to be complicated. And then your part of your devotional journey then becomes the learning, because you do it in tandem. I did it in tandem. I was venerating this goddess and learning about her at the same time. And it's just it's one of those things. It sounds so simple, but it can seem so daunting when we don't really know what to do.
Yes. Lexi is here. Hi, Lexi. And Lexi said Juliet Sherman Burke from the Mythic Tarot. So thank you for that. Viviani is here. Vicky Howell is here. And there were a couple of other. And Linda De Gonzalez is actually doing a very good job as moderator with making sure that your links are being put in. So I appreciate that. Oh, look, we have a cattail.
Cattail, yes.
Yes. Well, and Merita said, well, Demeter did work with Hekate to find Persephone.
Exactly, yeah.
And
something that is often omitted from, a lot of modern, at least from the Victorian period onward, translations of the myths. Hekate is completely omitted out, whereas actually she has quite an important role in the original Homeric hymn that details the abduction. She comes to Demeter on the ninth day with torches and helps her look for them, and takes her to Helios to ask what happened, and then obviously towards the end becomes this this friend and companion, this intermediary that kind of ushers Persephone up and down, during the courses of the year. But yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and Ken, early ritual Tom really wanted to be here, but this stupid work needs him. So he's going to probably be watching the playback. And Nancy O'Crone's intuition is here. So this is beautiful. We do have a couple of questions, and I've marked those. So I am keeping track of those. And is it okay if I share how I became aware of her?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I became aware of her when I was when I was officially studying to become a member of a coven. There were certain goddesses that were called upon, and who were, oh, you got to know about this goddess, you got to know about this goddess sort of approach. And she was my first patroness in my official study. So she has been with me for the 12, 13 years that I have been working. So that's an interesting experience that I'm not at liberty to share online. But with that journey, it's like, okay, there we go. And it's like when you hear something and you, like you were saying, Ken, you don't know about, and so when you get an experience with a goddess, then you start doing all sorts of research.
Yeah.
And then you start looking at research. You start researching and playing with it. So hello, good to see you. Thank you, Brato. So okay. All right. What is she the goddess of? Let's ask that. And did you just see how Ken's eyes rolled up a little bit? It's like, what's she the goddess of? And I was teasing him, like, is it easier to say what's she not goddess of, or what doesn't she influence?
And to be honest, I don't think I can think of much, if anything, across the span of time that we have of references to her and references to people calling on her or worshipping her. She's kind of got fingers in lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of pies. Yes. If not every pie conceivable. When we first see the literary source of in the Theogony, she is lauded as this benevolent goddess that literally, can make the catcher, the fisherman better. She can make the herds of cows and sheep, increase. She can make your crops fertile. She can protect and guide people. She stands with kings in judgment. She helps athletes win. She helps people win battles. And so even then, at those early sort of sources, she literally is seen as this benevolent, all-encompassing goddess. And then over time, she just kind of picks up all these other things, either that because of conflation with other deities, and either larger ones that became sort of supplanted over the top of her, or more minor ones where she became supplanted over the top of them. And so then especially when you look at sort of Artemis conflation, she becomes this huntress, this protector of children. But then you also get the darker aspects that come later, where she's then involved with things like the underworld and witchcraft and darkness and all of the more unsavory things. But at the same time, she's, and again, I think, without sounding like a stuck record, it's this liminal point in the middle of everything. She is light and darkness, and she's the light in the darkness, and the darkness that's at the center of the light. And even when you look at things like her torches, they're light, but actually in the myth where she helps against the giants, she takes a fairly benign object of a torch and she uses them as a weapon and and overcomes Clytius. She doesn't need a bow and arrow or a spear or a thing. She's just like, I can do it. Just, I'll just stub my torches out on him. Simple as that.
I love that.
I think that is very telling of the fact that she makes everything that she is involved with and she does seem so effortless, because she just is.
Tarot Shrink is here. Hello, good to see you. We were just talking about
thank you very much for your video. It was lovely.
Yes. And question, how has this project changed your relationship to her, and if so, how? Also, were there aspects you discovered as part of the process?
So I wouldn't say my relationship's changed, but what I have noticed is, and this is partly me and my experience of knowing full well what I'm doing and that she knows what I'm doing, is because I have quite a self-deprecating nature. And when obviously the deck came out, I was like, okay, yeah, it's great. And then I got this like huge sense of imposter syndrome. And I was just like, who am I to have made this deck? Who am I to be talking about it? Who am I to do this? And that in a sense, kind of, I felt I was distancing myself from everything, even though I was coming and, I would talk to people and when I would comment on videos because it was nice to see. In the back of my head, I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? It should have been someone else. And I think the goddess, she knows full well she's kicked me up the backside enough times. When I get like this, she tends to stand literally, like one of her namesakes, the worker from afar. She tends to go afar and wait for me to realize and then catch up. And so I think, again, it's all part of that learning process, and there's the constant struggle between the shadow and the light, and working through your own insecurities and things. As far as the aspects that might have been discovered, I was kind of pretty aware of most, just because of literally having read pretty much anything and everything I could get my hands on in the last 15 years. And obviously, the resources of quite extensive lists of epithet cult titles and things that you kind of start to know about. And I really didn't want to put anything into the deck that I wasn't familiar with, or, because I didn't think it would be right for me to try and interpret something that I had no real sense of. Even though it would still be Hekate, it wasn't an aspect necessarily that I dealt with. And then obviously you have the flip to that of where do you stop? You know, we had 60 cards, and it was like, yeah, we haven't really scratched the surface here. It's like we can keep going.
Yeah. Well, and we sort of talked about this in the deck casuals where we were talking about it, and you shared this with your videos that you've posted in the creation of the deck on Chris's channel. There's you get this understanding and this personal gnosis, then you have to explain it to people who don't know it, and it's this beautiful way of refining your understanding, because that's when the student becomes the teacher. And there's this, okay, I have to explain this to you in the most concise manner that is filled with opportunity for you to discover more. Which, and right after, and I said to Kenn, right after the first live that I had with him and Chris, I was just like, because I do work with Hekate, I'm looking, she is extremely proud of what you've created because you've opened so many doorways. So we have another question. It's like, adore the deck. Thank you for it. Another question, if I may. Are there any aspects looking back you wish you included? And I will actually say it would be great to include those in your forthcoming book that you're writing about her, right?
Yeah. To be honest, I mean, I think it works with what I went with. Obviously, during the creation process, there were changes. There were certain ones that I took out, or ones that I changed just because they were too similar to something else that I wanted to include. But at the same time, you know, a lot of people kind of mightn't be familiar with her role as Kuratrophos, the nurturer of youth, which is quite well known as, you know, from her protector of children kind of role, but I didn't include it in the deck. And what came about then was that I instead ended up having Pamator in there as the mother of all, because I felt it covered more of a thing rather than just focusing on children or, you know, childbirth or anything or something like that. And so it wasn't so much a sort of conscious decision that something was better than something else. It was, as I've touched on before, that it was kind of a semi-guided, sort of, I hate the word, but channeled kind of project where, you know, between discussing it with Chris and obviously then having the goddess on your shoulder going, no, I don't like that, or I want this to be that color or whatever. So I wouldn't say there's anything that stands out as me like really wishing that I'd have put in there, but it does also mean that there is lots of potential for future projects.
Yeah, for which I personally am thrilled about. I'm thrilled about that, especially because I'm not the one who has to make those projects come to life. So I just get the benefit of that hard work. Thank you for the question. It's a beautiful question. Free Spirit has come in. Hello, Free Spirit. And Mr. Floyd Channelings has come in. Thank you. And Jana, it's good to see you as well. And Mr. Kenn Payne, your voice is a powerful tool. There you go. There you go. Okay. Thank you. Excited for any future writings projects from you. Yeah. And I think, and I think one of the things that I do appreciate it is from you and from your work and talking with you. By the way, I'm going to heap praise in your general direction, so get ready.
Get my is ready.
Yeah, okay, get ready. There is an authenticity about the experience that you have with her, and that authenticity comes through in the writing and in the creation of the deck, because sometimes it's challenging to make it come through, if that makes sense. I think, yeah. So,
I mean, it's actually quite interesting because obviously I'm mentioning about this sense of distance at the minute between me and the goddess because of just me being stubborn in my own way. I kind of stumbled across something somebody shared yesterday on Facebook, and it was written by a fellow devotee that I've been in contact with for a while. He's a lovely person, lives in Paris, I think it is. I helped him out with some yew because he couldn't find any in Paris. So I sneakily sent him some in the post because I've got 2 yew trees at the end of the road.
Okay, excellent.
But yeah, he posted. He'd written something previous and somebody else shared it, and when you get those moments where you think, I needed to see that right now in this moment because it makes perfect sense. And what it is that he says is, it's literally just a tiny little paragraph. He just said, the devotee must presume much in order to connect with Hekate. She must do so knowing that the titan that she calls Sotera, the savior, will ultimately be her Oletis, the destroyer. She must accept that the very hounds that do the devotee's bidding today will bring her to the earth tomorrow. Yet still she must worship, must make the call, must heart secretly yearns for its mistress's arrow, so the devotee's soul secretly longs for the hound's tooth. For only when she has left this world can she herself manifest as a true hound of Hekate. And I was just like, yeah, I needed to read that. That was like perfect.
That's really powerful. Really powerful. Wow. Huh. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, really, really powerful. So there are a lot of amazing people in the chat. More people are coming in. I do want to run through some of the starred comments that I have before we move on, if that's okay, Kenn. Beth Aspasia Rising, who actually had to go to a dentist appointment. Hekate seems far less straightforward than other deities. It's difficult for me to know how to approach her, not from fear, but sort of mystery, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think we did touch on that one a little while ago.
And we'll talk a little bit more about that toward the end. So, Mark, who on your channel has asked, how long have you worked with her?
About 15 years.
Okay. And do you recommend, do you have any recommended book recommendations for Hekate?
So I will always recommend Hekate Liminal Rites by Sarita D'Este and David Rankin for a very easy to digest, small introduction to historical Hekate. If you want to go further, then I will also recommend Sarita D'Este's Circle for Hekate, Volume 1, which deals extensively with the history of the goddess and her worship and her symbols and her cult centers and the other deities that she's conflated with. I will always put them like quite high up at the top of my list.
Of course.
And again, it can depend on what angle you're wanting to try and approach her from. Some people like to jump in the deep end and go through the Greek magical papyri and all that kind of stuff, and then other people want it a little bit more accessible and a bit more modern sort of language and interpretation. So obviously the work of Cindy Brannan is quite good. She's got Keeping Her Keys, Entering Hecate's Cave, and Entering Hecate's Garden. She deals with Hekate from whilst drawing on her own sort of psychological background. And then obviously Tara Sanchez and the Temple of Hekate. That's a nice little accessible, almost like a workbook. There's there's rituals and prayers and things in there, as well as a little bit of history and things like that. Yeah, I mean, I'm literally just gazing across at my bookshelf because I can see them all.
Yeah.
Because I tried to make it my aim to have everything, even if it's rubbish, or well, not rubbish, but even if it's not great or it's dated. I mean, I another book that you can't really get easily is The Goddess Hekate by Stephen Ronan. I think it was published in 1996 or something like that. It's a little hardback book, but it's got loads of little essays, and it deals with Hekate within the Chaldean oracles and about her Hekate suppers and things like that. But it's not easy to get a physical copy, although I do think Amazon have a very poorly formatted Kindle version for about $3.
Yeah.
So depends how much of a headache you want.
So do you happen to have these on your website at all?
On my website, on the Sanctuary website, there is a recommended reading list, and they're all listed, as well as probably others I can't remember at the top of my head.
Yeah.
But it also, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be looking for a book that literally says Hekate in the title, because when you start to look at things like general books on historical Greco-Roman Egyptian magic, like I mentioned, the Greek magical papyri, but also people like Daniel Ogden that's written about Greco-Roman witchcraft and sorcery. I always have quite a raised eyebrow if I look in the index of a book like that and Hekate isn't in it, because I'm just like, well, then it's not a good book because she's, you can't gloss over her.
Yeah. Well, and I think part of it is there is a great sense of mystery about her. And part of that mystery is it's based in fear, because I mean, let's face it, she has many aspects, and many of those she is the goddess of magic, but she's also she's a dark goddess, and a lot of people are scared of that. That is, they do not understand, so they fear it. Is how I see it. And by the way, Free Spirit did ask, did the new big guidebook come up? You mean the one
I'm still working on it. I'm still working on it, but I am doing it. I'm doing it.
So and we are doing that just because we are excited for you. So
yes,
please
I know.
Understand that.
I have a bit of ADHD brain, so if I don't know it's going to be perfect, I just procrastinate till the cows come home. But I did do a bit this week. Because I felt the tingle in my fingers and just threw myself at the keyboard.
So my question is the ADHD. What would Hekate say about that?
Oh, probably quite a lot, but also at the same time, she'd probably just roll her eyes because she's she's been here with me quite a lot like that. I'm unfortunately, like human nature is, I don't always learn my lessons. I do tend to make the same mistakes.
I have never done that, Ken. I have never done that. This is sarcasm if you can't feel it.
I can see your halo slipping.
Yes, my halo is slipping. I should have my I could put a mustache behind my head so it looks like I had horns. So Michelle Marie, Astrological Tarot, and Jonathan have come in. Thank you for being here. And so one of the things is, okay, so, I mean, again, the best chatters are bringing it. Right now, Ken, we have 37 people who are watching because they're interested in learning from you. So thank you for being here. Yeah, what? Make a mistake? So, and I love the philosophy of better finished than perfect.
Whereas my brain's always, no, if it's not going to be perfect, don't even start. But that's an ADHD, I think.
I've okay, I'll own it. I've done that too. I've done that too. So okay. Uh, um okay. So what are some of the symbols and associations with Hekate? We'll ask that because we're already 15 minutes into this. So
Yeah, so I mean, we touched briefly before about like the torches. You know, that's
mhm.
probably one of the most synonymous symbols that people relate with her. However, it's not a symbol that's exclusive to her. You know, both in statuary and also in like vase paintings and things. You know, Demeter carries torches, Persephone carries torches, especially any scenes depicting, you know, the Eleusinian mysteries. It was all part of, you know, torches were a very important part of it because they were part of the myth of, you know, Demeter searching. But also Artemis is sometimes depicted with torches and things like that. But again, you know, they seem quite a benign object. You know, they just shed light. But as we mentioned before, you know, she uses them as a weapon, and you know, so they're multi-layered as both an illuminatory tool and a destructive one as well.
Yes.
You know, some people interpret them as, you know, like fire torches, so they're actually like hot fire. But then there are other people, especially with the more underworld aspects, they'll
Mhm.
see them more like spectral flames. They'd be like a cold fire, like a
Sure.
blue or a green. So you know, some people even think of them as, you know, souls that are kind of almost like fitted into these braziers, and you know, the imagination can run wild with those type of things. But then obviously when we look at other aspects of symbols, you know, the other ones that are very strongly associated with her are keys. You know,
Yes.
she has the epithet Kleiduchos, where, you know, she is the key bearer. And there are ritual and historical references to keys. There was a sort of ritualized procession between her temple at Lagina and the city of Stratonikia. And it was a kind of, I think it was every 5 years that they did a procession of the key between the temple and the city sort of gates. Um, but then again, you know, you can go from the very literal, very small aspect of that to the notion of her as the cosmic key holder of the whole
Mhm.
world, which is
Yeah.
referenced in the Orphic hymn. You know, so she has the keys to the cosmos. You know, so
Yeah.
she can, again, she can do whatever she whatever she likes. You know, she has all of the ability to unlock or lock these things. Um, then we have things like the dogs. You know, the dogs are seen, but either, you know, as a hunting dog or as the dogs that would be patrolling graveyards and crossroads and
Mhm.
desolate areas. Um, but obviously, you know, from our point of view, we see dogs as you know, as loyal companions. You know,
Yes.
then you have service dogs. You know, so you get guide dogs and protected dogs, and so again, there are so many layers to these simple, you know, key, torch, dog. You know, they're quite simple words, but actually, like anything in the language of symbols, it's so many layers.
Yes. And that's, I think, one of the beautiful opportunities is when one starts to study and get to develop a personal relationship with deity and Hecate, looking at those symbols and what are the aspects of the symbols? What could they mean? You know, like you described the dogs. They patrol, they protect, they're a constant companion, they are service. There's lots of different references to that, and I think that's extremely powerful, and it's one of the ways, personally, when I'm working with deity, that I like to peel back those symbols. What does that mean? What could that mean? What could that mean? How does that relate to the other aspects? So,
Yeah, and I mean, I think you know, when you look at the language of symbols, that to different people, there are universal interpretations of symbols,
Mm-hmm.
and then obviously there are specifics within religion or culture or whatever. But especially in these modern days where the whole world is kind of a bit of a melting pot, everything influences everything else. And people will always say, oh, Hekate and dogs, so that means protection and guidance, etc. But if you personally have had a bad experience with a dog, you are not going to necessarily see them as a good, positive thing.
Very good point.
And so that is your personal symbolic language.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not to say that, oh well, don't ever work with Hecate's dog aspects, but then that's it's just a case of don't assume everybody is going to gel with the same symbols for the same reasons.
Correct. Yeah, I think, and this is your behind you, that symbol, what did you call that? I could never pronounce that.
The wheel.
Yes, the Hecate's wheel.
I mean, we refer to it as Hecate's wheel. Some people call it the Strophalos, but there's a slight misambiguation of what a Strophalos is and what the symbol of the wheel is. They're not necessarily mutually exclusive.
Mm-hmm.
The Strophalos was a spinning apparatus, a spinning tool used for oracular divinatory purposes. The symbol of that we know as Hecate's wheel is more of a modern association with the goddess, although the symbol itself has an ancient origin, because it's I think it first appears as a sort of decorative bronze medallion from Mycenae. It's not actually linked to Hekate in any way, shape, or form that we know of so far.
Sure.
But the Strophalos was, I think one source in the Chaldean oracles refers to it as like a gold cage that would have a lapis lazuli or sapphire inside it, and then a piece of leather thong, and you would spin it. And the whirring emanation of the gemstone, tinkling around inside it, was meant to draw the spirit and draw Hekate down. And then obviously there are what they call Yinx wheels, which were similar serrated sort of discs that were a bit like a whirligig, the pull, push thing.
Yeah.
But again, in some sources, they said that they used to fix wryneck birds to them, and then swing them round, and then obviously the screaming of the birds was meant to bring down the the spirits.
Yeah.
Quite extreme oracular divination, but
Yeah. Well, and she is associated with the Crossroads, and Merita has been putting in a lot of really good information about offerings and such that you can leave at Crossroads, oftentimes in a graveyard, if you are wanting to work with her or to pay or to provide some worship. So again, for entertainment purposes only, know your limits, do a lot of good research on that. And by the way, good research means your own personal conversation with the goddess to what works and what doesn't. So, we do have a question here from Jana that I want to mention. Does Hekate lead from behind? I plead ignorance if leading from behind upsets anyone, but does she lead from behind?
I've experienced her leading from behind. She's, she can be ahead of you. She can be at the side of you. But I think dependent on what the circumstance is and the lesson that you have to learn will depend on her positioning to you in that situation. But when I first encountered her, she led from behind. That was the thing. It was the hand on my shoulder that I felt.
Yeah, that was actually. I appreciate this question, Jana, because that's how she came up from behind for me. Is how I experienced, and but I would say from behind, and it's not a shove. It's a sometimes, and this is Gerald's experience, sometimes I feel the hands on my back or on my shoulders to keep me steady so that I don't retreat in fear.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, I stand firm in the fear and understand, and I'm feeling her right now. I feel her support of it's like, okay. So
it's almost like that trust fall exercise. You know she's there, but you don't have to fall back. And very, even if she is behind, the light that she casts is shining ahead, and that's the important thing.
Yeah. Book Bewitched said, my son and I are on new journey, living together in making our altars as well as all else. We're trying to meld strong beliefs to make our sanctuary. He's reticent of read my Hekate altar or any Greek. I mean, just so long as he doesn't disrespect, I think that's good.
Yeah, I mean, I come across this kind of dilemma quite often online in Hekate groups where people were like, can I put Hekate on the same altar as such and such, or can I do this, or does she only have to have a place to herself? And from my own personal experience, yes, she does like to have her own space, but she is quite happy to sit alongside most of the other gods and spirits that I've ever sort of associated with or worked with. I mean, I always have a bit of a tongue-in-cheek anecdote that I always had this image when I was having a sort of a pull and a nudge from Odin that I was resisting like crazy, because I was like, no, I'm Hekate, I'm not anything else. But it was always the case of like the two of them sort of just leaning against a wall together, sort of almost like tutting and rolling their eyes, going, is he ever going to bloody shape himself?
Oh my gosh, mine do that too. I love that. And yeah, I am similar to you. She does have her own private space.
Mm-hmm.
And actually on that space, one of the things that I have is I have dark moon water that I put for her, because she's oftentimes associated with the new moon or the dark moon.
Mm-hmm.
But I also have, I mean, because she has her own space, I feel comfortable with including her in other areas, because she's on my main altar with another deity as well.
Mm-hmm.
So this isn't about me. This is about you, Kenn. So okay, I'm just looking at all the great comments. This is wonderful. And Merita put up, Hekate, often known as the Queen of the Night and the Goddess of Witchcraft, holds a unique place in the spirit world's hierarchy. Her domain is that of the Crossroads,
mm-hmm.
where the boundaries between life and death converge. Acting as an intermediary between spirits and humans, she possesses the ultimate key that can unlock the gates of all realms. So I love that.
Yeah, that's really good.
I love that. And so it's so, anyhow, look at me. I'm like, oh yeah, blah, 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 blah. So, and Michelle Marie said, love that. And Ishto Devata is the personal deity with whom I'm a devotee. Feels like the greatest affinity, or whose distinct gifts are most needed by the worshiper to help with a specific problem or desire. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Okay. What are some of her important powers?
So, and we kind of discussed this briefly before we came on, and I was kind of a little scratching my head, because obviously previously we'd talked about what she's the goddess of, and then obviously when you think about what some of her important powers, and I used this description that what she's the goddess of is a sort of almost like a passive descriptor, whereas what are her powers are more a sort of an outward active descriptor. Yes. And obviously, I think the one that most people will probably associate with her is witchcraft, and and magic and sorcery, which there is so many sources in antiquities, that in the Greek magical papyri, lead curse tablets, the references to Medea in like the Argonautica and things, where she is a priestess of Hekate, and she uses her relationship with the goddess to be able to pull off these magical feats to help Jason obtain the fleece and things like that. So I think that is probably, it's quite a nebulous concept, because obviously everybody that has a relationship to any form of magic or witchcraft will be doing it from a slightly different perspective. Or some people are doing it from traditions or cultural backgrounds. Other people are kind of just doing it how it feels right for them. Some of them are working very local, with land spirits and things like that. So it encompasses a lot of things. But I think that as the main, or one of the main presiding forces over it, Hekate is really good to approach as a goddess of witchcraft and sorcery, to help you unlock knowledge, or to help you bring a spell's outcome to fruition.
I think that idea of is she is going to help unlock knowledge, especially because we have keys that will unlock doors. We also have torches, which are an aspect of enlightenment. And I think that's when we combine these things, much like the Temperance card in the tarot, we can have a more complete and robust outcome.
Yeah. And I think, again, Hekate embodies that, that elemental balance. She has aspects that can be associated with all of the four main elements, at least from the, our modern Western traditions. But even back in, Paracelsus time and stuff, there was references to elemental forces in relation to Hekate.
Yes.
One of the references to the four-headed Hekate, with them having the heads of different animals that were related to the different quadrants, and things. I think it's a bull, a hydra, a horse, and something else. I've forgotten what the other one is. But I think it's similarly as inspired other things that other people have done. And there are so many facets to witchcraft and magic, that in the same way as there's so many facets to Hekate.
Yes, very true. And so because we're at an hour and 10, which has been speeding by, I'm going to combine the last two questions that I posed. Was how can or does one celebrate Hekate? But perhaps let's start with this one. Where does one begin to study with or work or worship Hekate?
So, I mean, as we touched on with one of the questions earlier, that just start. It sounds a bit counterproductive to say start, but if you don't, if you're literally starting from scratch, but you can. It's one of those things. It builds upon itself as you go. So we live in an age now where we do have information at our fingertips, and if we have the resources, to buy responsibly, to get a book delivered the next day, if we so choose, and so we can, and obviously, videos and channels of people that discuss all of these things, so we can start just by approaching them. I think the sincerity and the openness of yourself speaks volumes before you get bogged down in all of the details. And that's not to say that the details are not important. I'm not saying just go out there and do whatever, but you don't have to. I don't think there is a signing off point where you go, "Oh, I know everything now, so that means I'm ready." I don't think that exists for anything. So if you're waiting for that, you're going to be waiting for a very
You're gonna wait a long time.
So you may as well just get started.
And I think one of
so but yeah, I mean,
go ahead. No, we had a little delay. Keep going.
No, I was just going to say, so you can just get into the your preferred method of learning, or your preferred avenue of sourcing information. And I always think that ask the questions. Go to the groups and the forums and stuff. I always say that there's the only stupid question is the one that doesn't get asked.
That's correct. I would agree
because
with
you. Even if it's not, if it's a really obvious answer, if you don't know it, it's not for me to say, oh well, you should know that. If I've got the knowledge and somebody's asking for it, then I give it to them, or I point them in the direction for them to go and get it.
Yes.
And I just think that it's just about just starting, just do it.
I think that's a really good, that's beautiful. Just start. I also say check what is in your heart. And just make sure that you understand what's in your heart and why you're doing it. And you don't have to fully understand it. I mean, I'm a complex human being. I'm a complex person. So why I first started, a week later could be I could be looking at things differently because of my experience and my personal understanding with. So I think I love that just start, because oftentimes she's the triple goddess. Because there's three aspects, just the three, no more. But the maid, the mother, and the crone, she works with all of them simultaneously. And as we go through our lives, sometimes we are the maid, and sometimes we are the mother, and sometimes we are the crone.
And I mean, I think that even from that example, that is quite a good example of depending on what the background or tradition that you're working within or coming from. Because obviously the notion of her as maiden, or an aspect of maiden, mother, crone, or being all of them, is more of a more modern, later interpretation. Whereas the triple form in antiquity was all of maidens, young women of the same age. It's not sort of conflated the same that this chronal aspect. And that, I've talked about it before about at one time I was very adamant that it was like, no, she's not the crone, she can't be the crone, blah, 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 and I was quite like being my bonnet about it. But I've tempered a bit more, and I'm like, well, if that's how people connect, or if that's how she comes through to them, who am I to criticize that? They have their relationship, I have my relationship. I can as long as they're not just running around going, well, she's the crone and that's it, full stop.
Yeah,
that's different. If that's an aspect that they are connecting with while still learning all of the other relevant information, then have at it. We can't go around policing everybody and criticizing each other, because so much energy is wasted doing that.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that we have more in common with our devotion to Hekate than we do about the different ways we approach it.
Yes. Very, very true. And I think if we're spending too much time judging others, we have no time to grow ourselves. We're looking outward instead of paying attention to what's going on and developing our personal understanding and experiences with.
And more often than not, anything like that, any form of outward fixation on what other people are doing, it's projection. There's faults in ourselves that we don't want to confront, so we project outward.
Yes. There was Beth, who had to leave, did asked me a question, and it is, what crystals to use in working with Hekate?
Okay, so again, a lot of people will see the crystal thing as a bit more of a moderny, new agey thing, but there are references to gemstones or crystals in relation to Hekate, like with the original Strophalos having either a lapis or a sapphire inside of it. There is in the PGM the action of creating like a talisman from a lodestone by carving a very basic triple form Hekate onto the lodestone. People associate meteorite and things like that with her. In one source from, I think it's Porphyry on Images, he mentions the colours red, black and white in relation to a waxen image of the goddess. And that leads to a lot of people, myself included, who then utilize red, white and black stones to represent different things with Hekate. But I think, again, she can work with any. Yes. If you're working with a nurturing aspect, then crystals that have nurturing energies will be more beneficial. If you want to work with her protective aspects, then black tourmaline, black kyanite, all of the grounding protective stones. I think it very much depends on how or what you want to work with her. I wouldn't say there's necessarily any that would be like, no, that's not going to work.
Yeah. I agree with you, and I like the idea of, let's remember, crystals do what we want them to do. Crystals do what intention we put in them. And if you're drawn to a particular stone in working with her, then pick it up. I mean, pay attention to that. And so I do have black stones on my personal altar with her. I also have quartz clusters on my altar as well as other things like keys, and and I have a crystal skull there because that's what I was drawn to in working with her.
So. I mean, I've got a jet sphere that I have because I use that to represent the dark moon. But I also have two. They're only about that big, but they are the flame carved, but it's golden healer quartz, and I just have them either side because they just are like torch flames. It some of it can be symbolic, some of it can be more practical. It again, whatever works.
Yeah. And again, the best chatters are bringing it. A lot of people have been putting in things. I do thank you for that. That's been wonderful. Jana, you need to send me an email because you had asked a question and I didn't get to it. And so we can figure out a time to do that if you're still here. Gerald's always working. Anything is there? Okay, so we've been at an hour and 20 minutes. I think this is just really a starting conversation. You've had beautiful experiences. I'm assuming they've been beautiful experiences when you look back at them with Hekate.
They've certainly been experiences.
Yes. And I would say, I think I'm allowed to share, my relationship with her is very much a mother-child thing. She's very nurturing. She is for me, she's very nurturing, she's very much a healer for me, and pointing things out, just like, hey, and do pay attention to this. And yes, sometimes I do get the slap upside the head, but it is also, it's the slap upside the head and then it's the hug to like going, that was a stupid decision. Now give me a hug. Okay, take a breath. Now go out and don't do it again. But, if I do, she's going to, she may turn up the knob, the volume may be turned up. But Kenn, thank you, you amazing man. So, would you like to leave anybody with some thoughts about Hekate?
I just think that, especially in most recent years, I kind of refer to it as the Hecatean Renaissance, because she is having such a huge resurgence. Not that she ever really went away, because as you can see, if you actually sort of follow the thread of recorded evidence, she pops up time and time again. But I think that we are very much in this point in time in a liminal space. We can go either, things can go either way, for us as a global collective. And I think that she is calling to a lot more people, because she is imminent to human, to humanity, but also the fact that she can work change. She can instill people with power and lessons to affect change. And I think at the minute that is where we are. We need to affect change.
Yes.
And we need to affect change quite drastically and in quite positive tangents. But at the minute where we're standing is in this crux of liminality, where if we dilly-dally too long, we may not be able to come back from it.
Thank you for that. It does go back to something that you said, Hecate's proximity to the human experience. Mm-hmm. And we are definitely having an experience here. Mm-hmm. And she's wanting to help us.
Yeah.
So, and all right. So yes, a lot of love for this conversation. So, and I will say thank you to everybody for being here. I do appreciate you hanging out with us. And again, links are below to seeing the conversations about the Oracle of the Hekatean Path with Kenn and Chris. Also are the links below for the playlist for them talking about the creation of the deck, which, if you really want to learn something, pay attention to that, because it's the experience of all of the stuff that you couldn't necessarily get into a guidebook.
Yeah. And I like to say that the learning tool aspect of the deck was one of the things that kind of missed out a bit because of the set standard that the publisher has for the guidebook. Hence why I'm taking on everybody's comments about the bigger book. In fact, I've just been speaking today with two people regarding pronunciations, so it'll all be going in the book.
Fascinating. I love that. And I have to say, I think it's and correct me if you think I'm wrong, is it we have to develop our own relationship with deity, and sometimes deity gives us permission or encourages us to have a different reference to them, use a personal name. And so and
I think that I often reference that we walk paths to Hekate. We're not all necessarily walking the same path. We, some of them, sometimes we're parallel to people, sometimes we cross, other times we will be completely divergent, but we're all heading for the same thing.
Yeah. And Jana said, honestly, I'm reluctant to establish an altar. It seems limiting. I appreciate that perspective. I would consider it's an area of focus. It's something that I can focus my attention on. So I think it's, what do you think about that?
It's an interesting way to consider it. But I guess, and again, that would depend on their personality of, can they easily interact with the world around them and see the divine in those things. Whereas, as you mentioned, as you say, an altar can be a focus for you to get away from everything else that's doing your head in, to focus on the the divine and the relationship that you're nurturing. So I think there's pros and cons for both. It just depends on how it's executed, I suppose.
Yeah. And Hekate sends me does and bucks to let me know she's around.
That's the Agratera Potniateron Huntress aspect, the conflation with Artemis as well, I think, coming through there.
Yeah. And Book Bewitched feels so empowered, hugged, reinforced. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, and, thank you.
That's beautiful. So, all right. Yeah, it's a sacred space and not a prison. It's I think it's a good gateway. So, thank you, Sharon. All right, everybody. Thank you. Please do like and subscribe to Kenn's channel. And go over and give the slightly out of date website a look. But it's okay because he's working on the big Hekate book.
It's all on my ever expanding to-do list.
There you go. And you're probably not going to come back and talk to me because I'm going to, what about this? And what about this? So
stop giving me work.
Yes. All right. Thank you, everybody. Take care. Bye. Bye.